Media has changed as we know it. You know, I used to commentate for about 6 years on national media. Now, what you won't guess is why I decided to stop doing it. Let's take a quick minute. I want to show you some of the kind of funny old clips. I look like I'm 13, but we're going to bring them up real quick and I'll talk about them.
Michael, is it just a come down from the heights, or is there a reshuffling going on?
I think it's a little bit of a come down from the hype. You know, unfortunately, a lot of people, when they invest into the market, David, you know, most people, a lot of times, they're investing because of hype. You know, they hear this story, they get excited about this, so they invest in because of hype. And I got to be honest with you, you know, when we invest, when we're looking to do things for clients, we want to do the pay-to-play strategy, so to speak, where we have opportunities where they're kicking out a nice yield. But I think a lot of it is hype.
So it's obviously when I watched that clip, that's years ago, probably, 14 years ago, something like that now. But anyways, what I thought was very interesting is anytime that I was doing a clip, you might have different people sharing thoughts and ideas, and they wanted a lot of energy, but at the end of the day, it wasn't necessarily even backed around the fact of what was successful for clients directly. It was just like, what are your thoughts on this? And what are your thoughts on that? A lot of times when you watch those clips, there may not necessarily be something directly that the consumer, the viewer, can walk away from and use in their own life. Very interesting. All right, let's go to the next clip. This is also several years ago, but let's check this one out.
Mike, Larry wants to have his cake and eat it too. What about you?
Well, last time I checked, I don't think that's possible. I will say, however, things have changed a little bit, and I think one of the things we still got to be looking at is inflation, interest rates rising, and we got to have some plays for that. I still like the energy sector. There's a lot of growth still, I believe, yet there. In fact, if you look at the last 10 years, what we take a look at is sometimes considered the lost decade in the market, and quite honestly, a little over 11.5% a year with the particular ETF we laid out. I still like emerging markets. I think there's a lot of potential there. And quite honestly, kind of a double play, if you will, to help us with interest rates and things. I like the idea of hedging a little bit with gold, and in addition, shorting the treasuries with an ultra short that shorts 20-year plus, if you will, treasuries. As we know, as interest rates rise, bond values go down.
That's real old school. That's probably 2010, 2011. It's amazing when I look back at that. It's kind of like a trip down memory lane. But, it was so interesting as I watched that. Again, you didn't hear the gentleman before me, but he was kind of talking about both sides of the lane. And some of the things that we talk about here is you can't be specifically definitive on anything. I want you to understand this. As you're on media, you're not able to really give specific investment advice. And by the way, how can you? How can any commentator or anyone that writes a column on any paper or anything, even some of the things that you hear on the show here that I talk about that might be great ideas, may very well work well for some of the things that you've done in the past in life, you still want to get some counsel on what's the best thing for me. And so when I take a look at that and I watch that, I see a younger me developing in many ways, trying to speak to an audience and really being in a situation where he was trying to share a little bit of value to consumers and not get so in the weeds of minutia that people could actually walk away with 2 or 3 picks. That was always my goal, is like, how can I share 2 or 3 picks or whatever that people could walk away with? Because listen, the media in general did not want to talk about things off market. They did not want to talk about alternative investments that lived off market. That was something that I found on the regular. If you talked about those kinds of things, they really didn't want to hear it. They just kind of wanted to stay focused on the markets, on the stock markets, bond markets, what's happening in Wall Street. That was kind of the story. So they know that directionally, media is going to push the mindset and thought of investors. Now, why that's important to you as investors out there is, and I've shared this from time to time when I've spoken at different events, you may not realize it, but if you've been watching national media, financial networks for 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years, you might be brainwashed. And by that, I mean, all you're going to really think about is what they tell you. What they tell you there's opportunity, where opportunity's coming, where it's going. The other thing that I saw when I look at this is it really keeps investors on edge. There's no real sense of like security, if you will, of like, hey, you should do this or you should do that. And that's why really great planning matters along the way. That's one of the reasons that I actually decided to kind of exit media. I'll talk about that a little bit later. All right, so let's jump into the next clip. Now you're going to see how sometimes maybe you're not on a financial show, you're on just a traditional media show, news show, but they want to use certain financial pieces to kind of talk and dovetail around, we'll call it, their political conversation. Check this out.
We hear this, and we've heard this so many times from different members of Congress, past presidents, and we'll hear about it in the future, I'm sure. We're going to run out of money, the debt ceiling, default is on the horizon. Are you concerned about that?
Well, I think we should always be concerned, and I think at the end of the day, John Bianca, it's about the idea of what happens to the investor's capital at home. If the debt ceiling, and we do default, that could happen, may not,
But if it does, here's what you're going to see. You're going to see a situation in markets where they're going to be unstable. And by the way, at the end of the day, markets for a long time have been unstable. I think they're overinflated in a lot of ways. We've had a lot of quantitative easing. We've had a lot of things over the years, even the pre-Trump eras, that have baked in.
So you can see how they took a little bit more of a political kind of take to that segment. Over the years, I really started to kind of, we'll call it, get my skis under me, if you will. And I was in a place where I realized that the media is a tool, and my goal in the media is really to do everything that I can to provide information for you, the viewer and listener of this via podcast even as well, and really help empower you and make better decisions. But it's very interesting how sometimes certain news sources will take stories and pick stories off the shelf of the day to try and package something together, again, to maintain and keep eyeballs. What's hot? What's a hot topic? What can we talk about right now? And how can we integrate certain other aspects, finance, life, etc., to put it all together to keep more eyeballs? So important. We're going to look at the last clip. This last clip is actually from a local media outlet here in West Palm Beach area, and you'll see kind of a little bit of a feel of the difference of how the flow of this media interview was done. Check this out.
For someone like me, you know, in the early 30s, should I get advice from someone else, or how do I go about, you know, really making sure I'm doing the best things for me in the long run?
I believe that education leads to better results, right? And so a lot of times people are in a place where they just kind of get bits and pieces. They'll ask their neighbor, they'll ask John, they'll ask Sally, but they're not really getting education from a source that's going to provide them knowledge that makes sense. And so I think education is the key. You know, we put a ton of content out, and that's one of our goals, is to educate people, not just help families with their wealth, but educate people so we can be more educated. It's one of the reasons I wrote the book.
Right, I was going to bring this up. Retire once, retire well.
Yeah, and we were very blessed with that, did really, really well. One of the reasons that I wrote that is I wanted to write a simple, easy guide so people can kind of cut through the fog of Wall Street. You know, sometimes we hear things a lot, but it's not necessarily what we should be doing. So we need to educate ourselves, we need to step back, and this is really important, we need to make decisions based on facts and business, not necessarily just based on emotions.
So the theme that you heard me say there is educate, educate, educate. Educate people so they can make better decisions. That's one of the reasons I wrote the book, Retire Once, Retire Well, years ago, which I'm actually going to be coming out with a new edition for that, Legacy Edition here, which I'm excited about. But that's kind of really where the shift for me has been. I started into the business years and years ago, and as the shift has continued to come, as I do these types of podcasts and shows and other media, my goal really says, what am I really doing this for if I'm not doing some type of value or adding some type of value to the listener? My goal in life is to empower other people. Now, you may agree with that. You may disagree with that. You may not sure whether or not you want to believe that, and that's completely your decision. But one of the things that I've come to understand is simply the fact that media as a whole, as a source, is a company, and the company's job, the goal is to make money. And so that's one of the reasons that you saw me push towards talking more and more about education. That's one of the reasons that I really stopped doing national media, is not because I didn't appreciate the value of being able to share information to millions of people throughout the country, but one of the main reasons that I stopped doing it is because I didn't really feel like it was the right setting to share information to really help people make better decisions. The media has always been, and still is today, about sound clips, sound bites. And it's really interesting when you take a look at, I'll call it traditional media in a lot of ways. They haven't kept up. Advertisers have been in a place where they are more probable, I should say, to actually advertise on social type aspects than they are traditional media. One of the reasons is because of the ways that they can market to their audience. So what does this all mean to you, the consumer, as you're watching TV? Maybe you're in a place where you don't watch any traditional TV and everything you watch is on YouTube or other type networks like that, Hulu, whatever it may be. The question is, can I trust it? It's a hard part today. We've seen it in our society in so many ways, how people respond and then they react, and sometimes they'll even be a part of certain missions or groups, have anger, hatred, violence, all kinds of things that might come out of them watching on a regular basis different types of media. And the first question is, what is the purpose of the media organization? Their goal number one is to make money. Let me make it real simple for you. Their goal is to make money. So when you think about it from that lens, then you have to start to say, okay, is the information that I'm getting, is it really valid or not? Am I seeing the full clip of information or not? It affects the way you think. It affects the way your kids think. It can even affect your blood pressure. You know, you get worked up or settled down based on some of the things that you're putting into your mind. So when you look at that information and you understand that that media organization's number one goal is to make money, their second goal is to keep you dialed in longer. Now this goes to screen time. How many hours and hours a day do people actually spend on a screen or looking at a screen? You're looking at a screen right now, unless you're listening to this podcast via audio. And it's not always a bad thing if we can use the information constructively to help us think differently about our life. Now we have to start to genuinely question, is the information that's coming over my screen real and valid? Here's another question. Do media organizations care if the information is real and valid? Or do they care about making money and keeping your eyeballs so they can make more money? The question that you have to ask yourself is, am I making a good decision with the information that I'm receiving? And does this information actually apply to my life or not? We kind of miss out on the opportunity of focusing in on what should I be doing now? How can I improve my life? How can I improve my thought process? How can I improve my financial decisions? How can I take steps every day that will put me and take me closer to goals that I have in my life? I got to be honest with you, most people walk around in life, as Zig Ziglar called it, as a wandering generality, bouncing from here to there, like a ball in a pinball machine, almost out of control, not sure which bumper it's going to hit next. That is not a great way to live life. We want to live life being in a situation where we're making decisions that are going to take us closer to where we want to go. And I want to challenge you with this thought. Again, this is why I left national media, so I could start to share some of the things like this on podcasts. Whether one person listens to this or millions of people listen to this, the goal was to say, how can I provide more information and provide content that would actually penetrate the minds of people, get them to think on their own and make better decisions, not just financial, but life decisions. Remember, you are not a victim. You are where you are in life today because of a series of choices that you have made. Now, that doesn't mean that there aren't things that happen to us that are outside of our control. The question is, how do we respond to those things that happen to us outside of our control? Listen, be blessed. And I want to end the show with a big challenge, and that is slow down, shut off, and really think about what you're doing as you intake media. What are you believing? Why are you believing it? Who is sharing it? Are you listening to the whole story? Get information to make good decisions. If you want to join me weekly, by the way, we got what's called a weekly reset, short video for me coming out. Head over to golivewithpurpose.com and you can sign up for that. It's just a quick video. It's free. It costs you nothing to share information to you to weekly reset, get your mind on track to do things that you need to do to ultimately live out your goal and move closer to all of the things that God has planned for you. Be blessed. We'll talk to you next time.